Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This coming Shabbos, Parshas Eikev, is the 20th of Av. It's the 80th anniversary of the passing of the holy Rabbi Vayachilcha, the holy father of the Rebbe, of sacred memory, the 80th yard site. And we will learn the Maimer of Shabbos, Parshas Eikev, Chof Menachem, same Kviyas, the same way it is this year, was on a Shabbos, exactly 40 years ago. And we will learn the Maimer that the Rebbe shared on that Shabbos. And although the Rebbe doesn't say explicitly at this point in the Farbrengen, and this point in the Chassidic gathering, because the Maimer comes amongst Siches, amongst other talks in the Farbrengen, and of course the Rebbe spoke about his father and the yard site, etc. But it's obvious here there are certain elements that have to do with the passing and the resurrection that will come forth, and these elements are quite open in the Maimer. The Rebbe also talks about as always, some interesting concepts, and the Rebbe draws on the previous 2 or 3 Mamorim and several Mamorim. So there's really a thread going through the Mamorim that the Rebbe spoke 40 years ago, in 1984, in the summer, the concept of the neshama coming from a very high peak to a low point, etc., and being able to accomplish in the world the growth and the bringing godliness and revealing godliness on this earth through Torah and mitzvahs. So the Maimer Vayachilcha es hamon v'goimer. This week's parsha, Moshe is telling the Jewish people, going over what they went through, the desert, etc. And he says, and he fed you the manna, the mon, etc. The Alter Rebbe learns in the beginning of the Likutei Torah of this parsha of Eikev. And then we also have in the Mamorim of the Tzemach Tzedek that are based on this Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, and there are notations and explanations that are on the basis of the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, and they are to be found in the Oir HaTorah, which is of course the Mamorim of the Tzemach Tzedek. The Hinei Hamon Hu B'chines Tal. The manna, the mon, is the idea and the level of Tal, dew. D-E-W, the dew that waters the grass and crops. Kameisha kosovatal shichvas hatol, like it says explicitly when the mon is spoken about the first time in the Torah in the portion of Beshalach, and the layer of dew went up, and they collected the mon after that, and there was also a layer of dew under it. So the mon was compared to dew. Additionally, it's something that came from heaven, just like the dew. And the Gemara speaks about that in the future to come, Mashiach comes, God is going to perform the resurrection of the dead and revival of the dead with dew. And parenthetically, saying the Rebbe doesn't say it here, but we know when the Torah was given and the Jews heard the voice of God, like we read in the previous parsha, their souls also expired and they were resurrected and revived with this dew. Again, the Rebbe doesn't say it here, but that's this concept. Shehu b'chines tal Torah. And here the Rebbe says that that's the idea of the dew of Torah. Torah also comes down from heaven, it comes to us, and it gives us life. And this is what we say daily in the Amidah, when we praise God, and especially when we speak about the resurrection, we say, who brings life to those that have passed, to the dead, with much mercy. The inyan atal hu b'chinas rachmim rabim. The dew is abundant mercy, much mercy. And the Rebbe will discuss it a little later. Even though the flow and drawing down of the dew, and for that matter, the abundant mercy, comes from above, from the supernal realms, through the Holy One, blessed be He. Nevertheless, since the Torah is eternal and forever, take out the yellow highlighters. And it is a lesson that's forever, in all places, at all times, in every place and every time, in the service of our Creator, the service of mankind to the Creator. Every person has to say that I was created to serve my Creator, the one who has brought me and acquired me and made me. So therefore, everything in Torah, which is a lesson in how we serve God, is energy, and it is a lesson to us how to serve God. So this piece, that the mon is like dew, and it comes from abundant mercy, and that it's used for the resurrection of the dead, is also a lesson in our day-to-day life in serving God. And more than that, the Rebbe says, and that's also because the whole idea of the flow of the abundant mercy that will come in the future to come is dependent on our actions and our service now. In addition to anything else, it's commensurate to what we do, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in chapter 37. Therefore, there's these concepts and ideas in our service right now, in the service of mankind. To understand what is the idea of mercy and abundant mercy. So the Alter Rebbe explains in the Likutei Torah that was mentioned, and the other Morim, the other discourses, there are two levels in souls, like the verse tells us in Jeremiah, after it speaks of the destruction, and actually before also, it says there will be that time, and then there will be the time that I rebuild you, and that I bring you back and make you vibrant, etc. And the prophet says there, and I will plant then seeds of mankind and seeds of animals. Yes, and Vihine, here the Rebbe explains, according to Chassidus, in these two levels, so it says our seeds of mankind and animal. So in these two levels of man and animal, there are many levels. There are these two ideas, man and animal, even in the lofty levels of the spheres, the attributes that are supernal in terms of what the worlds contain and how they fit into the chain of creation and the energy of and flow of godly energy to create the worlds. So the spheres are the attributes, kindness, severity, etc., in every level, in every world. So bechinas adam b'spheres koyel zo hanikra adam ha'elyon. So the level of mankind in the spheres, that goes on the Zeranpin, which is called Zoh, which are the first 6 spheres. And you'll see the Rebbe, of course, mentioned this in the last mimer that we learned also, the Lehoy Yom Tov Yisrael. So, and the first 6 spheres is mankind, which is called Adam Ha'elyon, the supernal man. It's a reference to that level. And then the level of the animal, that is a reference to the level of Malchus, the final sphere, which usually we say one is male and one is female. Here it's one is human, one is animal, but there's a reason for this. And, of course. And the Sfira of Malchus isn't anything on its own, but it's the sum of all the other Sfiras together, and it's made up of all of them, and it's in a way that it can receive and purvey and give over. So, why is it the animal here? Asher agleha yordis lamata mi Atzilus, because the Atzilus, and we spoke about this also in previous Mamorim recently, the lowest part of Atzilus, of the highest world, becomes the highest part of the next set of worlds. The next world is, of course, Bria. So the way it's explained is Ragleho Yordos, so to speak, that its feet dangle over into the next realm. And in other places it's explained that it's really the same level, but now it's the top of the next stage, of the next 7 steps, so to speak. Because there is such an idea of animal, and therefore lower than Atzilus in all of the worlds, including the animals the way we know it, in all the 3 worlds of Bri, Yitzira, and Asiya, so the Rebbe says then that's a proof that it's on a certain spiritual, abstract level. We have that also in the highest realm, the highest world, the world which is so close to God, which appears to the other worlds as God and godly. So there must be the level of an animal there. Shehu Mokar HaKoil, it's the source of everything. V'hi Sfiris HaMalchus Kanal, so that's the reference to Malchus, because it's already more tangible than the other Sfiris, and in that sense that's like the animal. V'zeu Gam HaShenemer Zeis HaTeira Odom. And this is the verse which says, this is the instruction of man. Now there it's talking about if somebody becomes impure, etc. But this combination of words has another way to learn. This is the Torah. The Torah is man. The Koyal B'chinas Zodavke. That's a reference to the supernal man. The 6 Sfiris, specifically. Ki HaTorah yesh bar machnas esesei. Now, how's the Torah mankind? Because the Torah has 248 positive commands. Shekineged HaSfiris Dezo Shetziyurei Gimel Pamim Tes V'Heich Sodom HaMagdilim. So, then, the number of, first of all, let's do the simpler way. The 248 mitzvahs correspond to the 248 limbs of man. And they correspond, every mitzvah corresponds to one of the limbs. Now, if it's in Sfiris, we say that this is, in Sfiris is the number, and in the Sfiris itself, we said it's Zoh, we didn't include Malchus, but the Sfiris before, those are the emotional Sfiris, those attributes and those characteristics. They have to be preceded by the intellectual characteristics of Chochmah Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and then they go into the emotional. So that's 9, because you have the 3 of the intellectual and the subsequent 6 before it all goes to Malchus, because Malchus is the combination of all of them. So we're not including Malchus in this count, and therefore they made Kabbalistic the way things are drawn up or mapped out, so to speak, in different places, different points. So this one is also can be illustrated. We don't have illustrations here, but the way this works is that, and it's explained elsewhere in Chassidus, that every one of the Sfiris also has 3 levels. The most inward level and the most outward level, and the level in between, that's their content of what they are. And it's also called, by something that there's an acronym, which is the crown, which is Rosh, Toich, I'm sorry. Excuse me for a moment, but it's another Kabbalistic reference that it has the top, the bottom, and the middle. So it's 3 levels within every Sfira. So therefore, there's 9 times 9. each one of the spheres, the way they're made up of the others. So that's already a set of 81. In other words, and this is similar to what we do when we count the Omer, but here just remember it's missing Malchus in this particular way of looking at it. So it's Chachma with Chachma, Chachma Bina, Chachma with Das, Chachma with Chesed, Chachma with Gvura, etc. And it goes to all the spheres like that. And then it goes Bina together with Chachma, Bina, Das, etc. So all 9 with the other 9. So that's 9 times 9, that's 81. Now you have to take, so that's Gimel Pamim, 3 times of 9 times 9, Tes Pamim Tes. So that equals 243. 81 times 3. Now you have the 5 levels of kindness that they are rooted in, that make them exist. And there's what's called the Heichsodim, the Heigvuris, which are symbolic of the hands, which have 5 fingers each. And that's another Kabbalistic concept. Suffice it to say that the number 248 comes from 3 times 9 times 9 plus 5. And that's again a reference to the Chesed, because it says Chesed Yibana, Chesed builds. You need to have flow of something in order to get it tempered by anything else. You have to have the original point. And it's 5 levels of Chesed that have to get involved in this. Okay, so much for that. That could be expounded on another occasion. An animal does not have 248 limbs. It has another number. The Rebbe doesn't say it here. Even though, although an animal has limbs, and here the Rebbe just, on a historical standpoint, the Rebbe sticks this here into the Maimer, because I'm just giving the fact here. The Rebbe says a statement that every animal has a limb, has limbs. It's obvious. Of course animals have limbs. But he says, the example he brings here is from the law of not having a limb, not taking a limb off of a living animal. And the Rebbe says, boy, there's other ways that we know and reasons. Because the Rebbe was then, spoke several times, and subsequently much more, about the importance of sharing the 7 Noachide laws with mankind. And here this is, of course, the important mitzvah of being humane to animals is rooted in the fact that you can't take a limb off of a living creature. But nevertheless, that animal doesn't have 248. Okay. So now let's continue. The level of the animal, which we said is the Sfira of Malchus, which is always continuously wanting and yearning to be elevated and to go up to its source, because it's the lowest. Because it went down and descended below. And like it explains in Kabbalistic works, primarily in the Zohar, the lowest level of light, the lowest illumination, which is, and there is another Kabbalistic concept coming up here, which is called a black light. It's continuously calling out, and it wants to, and it doesn't let up, and it wants to be part of the supernal light, the higher light, like it says, and this Maimra also that Rebbe spoke about a couple months earlier. That in order that we praise you, your glory, and you should not be still, not be inanimate, etc. This level wants to go up to the highest level of light. And like it says in Tehillim, the 83rd chapter, doesn't say it here, but that was the chapter of Tehillim that was the Rebbe's chapter that year, because the Rebbe turned 82 on the 11th of Nisan, 5744. So here they don't bring it here, but it's obvious. So Tehillim Mizbah Gimel Elokim, and by the way, this mimer this was also expounded on the mimer that we learned at the Rebbe's birthday time. Elokim al damilach al techesh vel tishkoit. God, don't be still, and don't be quiet, and don't be silent, etc. This lower level of light, this lowest level of light, is not quiet. Al-dami, it's not still. It wants to and it yearns to go up to the highest realms. And now the Rebbe says, ad mosai, and like we say, till when? Till when meaning till when will I have to be on this lower level? Till when will I have this whole idea of ad mosai? It's a prayer, it's a request, it's a cry, and that's why the Rebbe says Lashna Yadua, because it became something that the Rebbe said we have to beg ad mosai. That's something that we say in Tillim on Tuesday and on Wednesday in Shishul Yom, etc. Okay, let's continue. He's burning his zub b'matzah b'chinas neheret haTorah zera b'heima. Maybe l'b'chinas rachmim. This, if we contemplate about this idea, this situation, that there's the lower light that wants to be elevated, that it's considered the seed of the animal, which this whole idea brings to the level of mercy. Mercy, shemerachim me'oimik nishmasei al yedidas neheret haTorah. He's mercy. He has mercy and compassion from the depth of his soul, because it went down to the lowest level. What does this mean in the service of mankind? That is thinking about what really happened to the soul. The soul went down from being at such a high point, high peak, from the highest peak, being within God Himself, to the lowest level, to the lowest pitch. Is a great and massive, mighty descension. And the soul wants to and yearns to be back and included and part of its source, which is supernal, which is the godliness. This contemplation, this thought process about these ideas, that brings about the fact that it's a rachmanis on the neshama. We have to have compassion and mercy on the soul, but it brings about and evokes God's mercy on the soul and makes the soul achieve higher heights. But this level of mercy, which comes down through this contemplating these ideas and the anguish of the neshama coming down to the lowest realm, but it's only commensurate with the understanding and the grasping of what you thought about and what you focused on and what you concentrated and what you contemplated, which is quite limited. And then that's how we can evoke it through what we have, what we can do. That's the supernal awakening that was caused by and then commensurate to the lower awakening that brings that about. So that was only about mercy. Now higher than that, the abundant great mercy, which comes forth from the supernal realms on its own, without having to ask for it, without it being evoked. From the source of mercy, and as it's explained at length with the Alter Rebbe in the Likutei Torah on the Song of Songs, there's the level of the supernal awakening that comes down, which is higher than the supernal awakening, which is a result of the lower awakening. This is a supernal awakening that comes on its own. And on this they said, the sages tell us that Kabbalistically that the Holy One, blessed be He, rests in a place which is complete. Then He comes down. It says, He comes to rest. That's it. He's there. He's present. He brings His presence. This is also a mimer that we learned recently in the last mimer in the previous mimer of Lehoy Yom Tovim Yisrael, that Tuba of 15th of Av, which was on the Monday. And Monday we say this, that God is great, that's higher than even the city of our God. One thing is the great revelation of God's name, and then there's the way that doing what you have to do on this earth, which is making it into a godly city, making it into a godly place, that increases the greatness of God. So great that it's even greater than the description of calling it great. This is the abundant mercy that comes from above. This comes from such a level of a supernal awakening that the lower awakening does not even reach that spot. Even in that area, there's even higher levels. And with your great abundant mercy, have mercy on us. That's then even greater than plain abundant mercy. So there's levels within the mercy itself. We say, God, have mercy on us. Have mercy on us with your abundant mercy, and then with your abundant mercy, have mercy on us. So that's not just plain abundant mercy. Specifically from that level of mercy. Then through completing the service that mankind could do in this world, then we get the result of the spirit returns to God which gave it. In other words, we grow, become closer to God. Like it says in Ecclesiastes. The result of everything that's done here is that the soul could go higher and goes higher than from whence it came, from where it came from. Because if not, it wouldn't have to come here. The level of from where it was given is even higher than where it came from. Because it was the giver. Whoever gives abundantly and very nicely, with a good eye. So then it has the level from where it was given, but then there's the giver who gave it. And you get up to the level of the giver, it's even higher than where it came from. And according to all of this that we discussed, we can start to understand what is the idea of the manna, which is the idea of the dew of resurrection. The mon. What's the difference between dew and rain? The rain is commensurate to how we study, and it's dependent on how we serve. Those that are in the lower realm, we pray for rain, we ask for rain, and we do what we do. And as God says in the Torah, if you do what you're supposed to do, I'll give you the rains in the proper times. Say it every day in the Shema. But dew, on the other hand, that it says never stops. The Talmud tells us that dew is a constant and consistent, and that never ceases. So, rain, that we have to pray for. Dew is something godly. That's the idea of the abundant mercy which comes on its own, with its own supernal awakening, just like the dew. The bread that comes forth from the ground has to come from work that we do here on the lower realms. That's where the person has to work to make things happen. Like the verse tells us, we're going to read it next week. God, your Lord, your God, bless you in everything that you do. After we fulfill what we do here on the lower world, then we get a blessing from above. And like it tells us in Genesis about our father Isaac, and Isaac planted in that land, and he had 100 measures, and God blessed him. So the blessing came after he worked. Shahu hatal hu b'chinas lecha min hashamayim. So the idea of the manna, the mon, which is like the dew, that's the level of bread that came out of heaven. Now, the manna was God gave the Jews in the wilderness. It wasn't dependent on what they did or didn't do. It came from above on its own. That's the level of, like we said earlier, the Holy One, blessed be He, rests in a complete place. He does it himself. Like the discourses that explain the mon, they explain this concept too. And there it says also that the mon came into being specifically on Shabbos. Now we know that God doesn't create on Shabbos. He didn't create on Shabbos. But nevertheless, how the mon came into being was something that happened on Shabbos. Specifically, Dafke, Kihu b'Bechinas Shabbos Shelamayla B'Beis Adam. Because the mon itself is like Shabbos, that is higher than what one has to do. It's rest. Therefore, it's something that comes on its own. This is a little bit of a tough concept. And the Rebbe will mention that here. Nevertheless, the mon didn't come down on Shabbos. It's just the idea of the mon is on the level of Shabbos, and therefore was thought of and made into existence on Shabbos. God continuously creates the world even on Shabbos. So this is a Shabbos concept, a Shabbos idea. But nevertheless, it only came down in the weekday. Therefore, that which the dew of resurrection comes forth, which is from the innermost of the highest level of Atik, that realm of higher than the Spheres, with the idea of when God decides that He wants to create, and then there are various levels that it has to go through in order to create within Himself, and within the concentration of Himself, measuring out how He can make a world that won't cease to exist because of the creation and the flow of godly energy, etc. So there's a level of Pnimius Atik, which is really from the highest levels. So, so this dew came into the physical world, and it came then when the Jews were in the desert in the form of the manna, to the extent, like the Gemara says, when the verse which describes the dew, the Rebbe doesn't bring the first thing that verse says, that they ground it. The Rebbe goes only to the second two descriptions of what people did with the man. But the Gemara comments that this was not necessarily inappropriate, but it's a lower level of people, that they couldn't deal with the man as it came in its form. And they had to, either whether they should have been able to appreciate it, or they wanted to appreciate it differently, they were let's just say a subpar level. So the verse says that they beat it with a mortar and the pestle, or they cooked it in a pot. Like the Gemara in Yuma says there, that they were on a very low level. Nevertheless, they got this lofty level of the dew, which is the dew of resurrection, from this highest level. This is what the verse says. Besides that, he says the beginning of the verse, which the Rebbe says in the beginning, he says, just fed you the mun. Now the Rebbe brings the rest of the verse. He fed you the mun, which you didn't know, and your forefathers didn't know. This whole idea of the mun, which is the dew, the abundant mercy, it's higher than anything that we can know or grasp. You don't know it. It's higher than your forefathers, and your forefathers didn't know it. Let's remember that the forefathers were considered a chariot. They go exactly where the rider wants it to go. A chariot has no mind of its own. It only goes to where it's driven. That's the type that the forefathers made themselves be so subservient to God and godliness that they're considered and called a chariot for godliness. So that's a very lofty level. And even they didn't know the mon. Because the mon comes, like we said, from this supernal awakening, which only rests in something which is totally complete, and the world wasn't on that level with the forefathers. But that, on the flip side of the coin, that Rebbe says is that the forefathers are mentioned here is by the fact that God fed us the manna, that had an effect on the forefathers. They should also get from this level. So even though this was many years later, etc. So that level, because it's a level, everything is here and now. Therefore the Rebbe says at this moment, the whole idea of the mon, which is the dew of resurrection, so this idea of eating in a holy way is the connection of the soul and the body. The soul is in the body, but it has to be sustained. Through eating, we nullify the possibility of the separation of the soul from the body. So the food gives the energy for life. Excuse me. But in the future to come, there will be an additional thing. The dew, which is the manna, there will be the resurrection of the dead. This will cause the combination, the connection between the soul and the body. In other words, these are dead bodies, and the soul will connect with the body and give it life, enliven it. So this is not just sustaining, as the mon would do then, and that's that level that happens now. But when Mashiach comes, it will come and connect the soul to the body. And like we said at the outset, the Rebbe is talking this on the day of a yahrzeit. This is a very great revelation, very lofty concept. And then, this this won't just be an abstract spiritual concept, but it will come forth in a physical sense in the manna, actual manna, at the time of the connection of the soul with the body. So the Rebbe says that when Mashiach comes, the man will come, will experience the manna once more. In the future to come, when Mashiach comes, there will also be the eating of man. As is known, the discussion that there are in the holy books, in the bottom we bring here from the Sdei Chemed, Rabbi Chaim Chizki Medini, and Rabbi Magolius and others that discuss things, and those books have a discussion of, since it'll be mon, what will be the blessing that they'll bless on the mon in the future to come. And now the Rebbe just brings this parenthetically. So why don't we say, what blessing did they make on the manna when they were in the desert? Let's say the same blessings. Regarding the manna which was in the desert, it's no question. In the desert, they only used to make the after bracha, the benching. The benching, which is a mitzvah in the Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu made that blessing because I'm Muslim, the blessing of grace after meals. But the blessing that you say before you eat food, that was rabbinically introduced later on. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs that Rabbanan. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs. Ashareva brachas d'Rabbanan nistakim zman by Sheni. And the majority of the blessings that were instituted during the time of the Second Temple period, as it's explained elsewhere, and it discusses this in Chassidus and for that matter, of course, in Niglan, the revealed Torah. And here it's written here, just Ketazay Nebor, this is unclear. Remember, the Rebbe said this on Shabbos, and this is all transcribed after Shabbos from memory. So it says that this piece was unclear exactly what the Rebbe said, although there is some clarity, I believe, in what it's 40 years later. So we maybe this concept, I think, isn't the hardest concept in the Maimer. Let's just say, I think we went over some harder things to understand, and that was border. That was clear. Okay, yes. So, through serving God, like we discussed in the 6 days of work, those are the first 6 millennia. We will speedily merit to the idea of the future Shabbos, the future Sabbath. That means when Mashiach comes, like we said, the main thing of Manna is Shabbos. The Shabbos and the Mon are one thing. Just like we say, all the opinions in the discussion of when the Torah was given, it's only discussion what day of the month it was, but they all agree that it was on Shabbos. Why? Shabbos and Torah is one thing. It's the supernal. It's the deeper focus of the world. But through studying all these things generally, especially in the Mamorim of our Rabbeim, our masters, the Rabbeim, from the Alter Rebbe ad Nasiderenu till the Nasi, the prince and the leader of our generation. That's the Rebbe. Now the Rebbe usually also refers to his father-in-law this way, that he is the one who took the place, fulfilled the place of all of the previous Rebbeim. The Tzaddik decrees, the Holy One, blessed be He, fulfills the decree, like it says in the Gemara. Will come actually to the resurrection of the dead. Neshamas begufim, souls will be in bodies, and then when Mashiach comes, we'll have Imsheir Habar v'Halev Yosan with the great meal that will be after the great spectacle of the great Leviathan fish slaughtering the big ox, the Sheir Habar, who simultaneously will be killing the great Leviathan fish, and there will be a great meal for the righteous made from that meat and fish. Now it is known the disagreement amongst the Rambam and the Ravid, Achrav and others was if this is just a parable of life, how the way things are, and the way there will be great things, and the other things that it says in the prophecies of the wolf will live with the lamb, etc. Or if this is physical, or if it's just like a prophecy to say that things will be peaceful. And Chassidus says that the rules that it's like the people who say that the main complete part of the reward and the fulfillment of the reward will be when the resurrection of the dead will be, and souls and bodies and all these things will actually happen in a physical sense. On the contrary, the soul will actually be nourished from the body. Because even though now the body is the lowest realm, but we know the lowest realm is rooted in the highest, so it'll then in an open way, it will sustain and give sustenance to the body. The body will give the sustenance to the soul and sustain the soul. And speedily in our days, actually so. And the rest of the Fabrengen, the other parts of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe speaks about his father, and he also speaks more about the Mon, including in other Sichas, and he speaks about the fact that in this week's Parsha it says twice Ze'ar Boim Shona. It's 40 years That's a discussion that Moshe Rabbeinu says, and it's interesting to note that I've already mentioned it then. It was only the 40th anniversary. Here we're talking about it's the 80th anniversary, so it's literally twice 40. It's interesting to point out. Anyway, the Eibusher should help that even before Chafov we should be reunited with the Rebbe's Holy Father, and have the fulfillment of all these promises and prophecies through our Torah study, which we should continue to do, and make good decisions, and we should make good resolutions to continue to grow, and we'll bring about that time we'll have the Manna, the Tchias HaMeitzim, with the coming of Mashiach may happen speedily. L'chaim.